All right, hi everyone. Welcome back to CSharpCorner live show. As always, I'm your host Stephen Simon, and we are back with another episode of CSharpCorner MVP show. And for this episode, I'm really excited. We have someone who's joining us all the way from Ukraine. He works on C Sharp, JavaScript, and F Sharp. I mean, when I just went through his C Sharp Corner profile and he works on F Sharp, I've not seen many people working into the field of F Sharp, and it'd be very interesting to know on what different kind of projects he works and how did he get into this F Sharp thing. But before we go ahead and invite our guest to the show today, if you are someone who is joining us for the very first time, we do this C Sharp Corner MVP show every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Indian time zone and 9 a.m. Eastern time zone. And apart from that, on Thursdays we do Ask Me Anything shows. Tomorrow we're gonna have Bob, who has been at Microsoft for more than 25 years, and we're gonna talk about SQL Server Edge to Cloud, and you can just bring in your questions in that event too. Then on Friday, we have Growth Mindset Show. That's why Mahesh, who is the founder of C Sharp Corner, he goes and talk about how you can go ahead and move in your career. I think the last episode, we talked about the full stack. And in this episode, we're going to talk about React versus Angular versus Blazor, and all the C Sharp Corner guys, right? So and you guys love it. Then one of the very exciting shows that we run on Saturdays, weekends, that's by David McCarter. That's Rocking the Codewell.net Dave. He has some really exciting guests coming in. I think he's had Caitlin Dollard, Matt Stodgerson, then all those big guys in the industry of .NET, and even just not in .NET, even on the Cosmos DB and all that stuff. So he brings really nice guests on his shows too. So having said that, without any further ado, let me go ahead and invite our guest. Hi, Bohdan. Welcome to the live show.
Hi, Stevens. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, Bohdan. I was just looking at your profile. You come from Ukraine. So what time is it over there?
It's 4 p.m. now. It's quite evening just starts. It's the beginning of the evening.
Okay, that is so. Bohdan, I know. So you often go ahead and contribute on C Sharp Corner platforms. You have written many articles. You are very active on forums. But still, I will ask you to go ahead and give a little introduction about who you are, what you do, and kind of stuff. A little bit about you.
Basically, now I'm the .NET developer in one of the companies. I can't name the business details due to some NDA restrictions, but on the technical side, which I guess the more interesting for all of you, my listeners, is we're doing a lot of different things. We're leveraging GraphQL for our API. We're doing Elasticsearch for full text search, which is also quite inconvenient. Also, we're trying to squeeze out some bits of performance because it's quite high-loaded projects. We're doing some microservices which communicate via RabbitMQ. Lots of stuff, lots of ground to cover. Also, maybe some stuff that I'm looking forward to explain more in details in new CSharpCorner articles.
That's great, Bohdan. And also, when I look at your content on C Sharp Corner, the articles you have written, you cover a very big ecosystem. You not just talk about .NET or C Sharp. You also talk about cooking Angular with TypeScript, right? You also talk about building auth endpoint with Go and AWS Lambda. I mean, there you go with the Go programming language. Then definitely you work on F Sharp, and all that stuff. So how did you go ahead and learn and work on so many different frameworks at the same time?
To be honest, always the main specialization for me was C Sharp, but allowed to try new things. And also, I guess the main point is all those new things are somehow making a better developer of you. For example, I'm really a fan of F Sharp, and I think it's really helped me to become a better developer and better C Sharp developer. So, at the beginning, I was a believer that F Sharp will take as big notion as Scala for JVM, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. But it changed the other way. If you follow the novel C Sharp 8, C Sharp 9 features, you can see that almost all of them, such as pattern matching or record types, take the path from F#. And the thing is that basically all those functional approaches are trying to get traction in mainstream .NET development, and that means that a lot of passionate developers who are looking how to improve their code, how to better write their code, they look into F# and they get some valuable insights. For example, one of my articles in on CSharpCorner was refactoring string into a specific type, and it was the case of primitive obsession, which is basically object-oriented smell. But once I noticed in my code, because I was starting to think how I would model that with F#, so basically all the stuff that I try, all those new libraries, approaches, techniques, they basically help me to become better C# developer first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of your articles have been really appreciated by the other community members, and people like to go ahead and read your article. And pretty in depth. You not just go ahead and write it. You also come up with some code samples. Then there's an explanation. There's a conclusion thing coming up. So definitely, articles are written in a very wise way, and people definitely appreciate it in the community. So, having said that, Boden, what are we actually going to talk today? I mean, what are we going to learn in next 30-35 minutes?
So today we're going to talk about span of T. It's the family of value types that allows you to allocate less unmanaged heap, which in turn allows to improve performance. Relatively, this is novel feature on one hand because I've seen quite a few people using it in their code bases. But on the other hand, it's quite old feature because it was introduced in C# 7.2 and now C# 8 and C# 9 arrived. Still, I think it will be useful for a lot of developers to know what it is and how to use it in their code.
Yeah, quick question, Boden, before you go ahead and start your presentation and with your demos. I've been taking interviews for many people. We even had this .NET conference recently that went for 2 days. I have not seen many people talking about this topic, right? People don't really discuss about it. So why is it that you chose this topic to go ahead and talk about today?
I guess there are a couple of reasons why people don't talk about this topic because I guess one of the reasons that people expecting some more, some bigger improvements, some more major concepts, and this looks like a quite small feature. The other thing, I guess, why people don't talk about it much is because in day-to-day job you don't always consider the performance, you don't always do some heavy benchmarking. Day-to-day job is more about working with business requirement, but one of my points is to show that you don't necessarily to write some performance critical code in order to use this feature because it's relatively easy to use it, as I will show you later.
That definitely makes sense, Boden. I'm really excited for your sessions. You can go ahead and start sharing your screen and I'll put it into the live stream then.
Sure. Let me share my screen.
While you share it, let me ask you a quick question. Did you receive your C# on MVP kit?
I'm not sure I hear the question properly.
I said, did you receive your C# Corner MVP kit?
Oh no, I believe I didn't.
Oh, why is that? Well, just we'll just follow up and we'll just send it to you. I think it might be pending. Okay. So you're a MVP from September 2020, right? So that's scheduled for April 2021. All right, that makes sense then. All right, I have your screen into the live stream now, and the next
Right.
35 minutes is all yours.
So Stephen Great did a really great introduction. So let's just jump straight to the business. So as you already know, my talk is using Sponty to improve the performance of the code. And basically, Sponty is the family of value types that write in C# 7.2, and it allows to represent you contiguous regions of memory in allocation-free fashion. We'll discuss later what this means and how it helps us. So the first thing is some sort of disclaimer. You can find a lot of material in the internet how to work with managed heap, how to allocate less on managed heap, how to do some heavy performance optimization with memory heap. But my experience tells that if your goal is some unspecific performance improvement, like just make my application run faster, in such case, I suggest you first looking at the duration of your I/O calls, because my experience tells this is the part that tends to be the slowest. However, if you exercise all your options with IO calls, for example, you used batch and you used caches, etc., or if your goal is specifically to reduce the memory footprint of your application, then you might consider to allocate less on the managed heap. And one of the options that might help you with this is the span of T, which today I'm gonna talk about. So at first, let's get back to some basics. Recall some really basic stuff. You know that managed heap data is stored there quite chaotically, which leads to quite slow access. And another point is that once you are done with your variables on managed heap, they get garbage collected. And garbage collector is heuristic, which in turn also requires some resources and which also suspends threads while it performs garbage collection, which also may bring to more performance penalty. But there are also some advantages. You can allocate quite a lot on managed heap. It has relatively big size. Stack, on the contrary, as you all know, is last in first out data structure, which means that once you use the variable, you just pop it out of the stack, which means that it has fast access and it doesn't require any garbage collection. But the downside is that it has relatively small size. So you can't allocate quite a lot on stack, and you have to be careful with that. And always that means that you need to benchmark your code in case you in doubt whether you should or shouldn't allocate on stack. Now, basically, there are two ways to allocate on stack. One of them is using the value types, which get allocated on stack in some scenarios, and another is using stack alloc and unmanaged memory. Those of you who have worked with unmanaged memory know that it's quite tedious process. Here is the example of code that manually allocates memory on stack, and it works with unmanaged memory. And I personally, I doubt that this is a human readable code. I mean, definitely somebody can produce this code to deliver some performance improvements in some critical regions of your application, but I really doubt that this code will be supported and will be changed easily. And one of my points on my presentation is to show how Span really allows you to work with those regions of memory manually allocated and stack in more convenient fashion. Here's the slide that tells it that really span of T can help you with that. At first, let's have a look at the internals of span of T in order to better understand what it is, how it works, and how it's structured. You know that there is a mantra that reference types are allocated on heap, whereas value types are always allocated on stack. But technically, value types aren't always allocated on stack. Dependent on circumstances, they may be also allocated on heap. For example, when those instances of those types are boxed, or for example, when they are parts of larger reference types. So in C# 7.2, refstruct modifier arrived. This modifier allows you to mark your type, to mark your struct, so it will be always allocated on stack. It can never escape on the managed heap. But in turns, it brings some limitations to you. Here they are listed. I'll mention a few of them. For example, you can see that refstruct can be boxed. It can't implement interfaces because once you cast to the simple interfaces, it again leads to boxing. It can be element type of an array. It can be captured by lambda expression. It can be a field of a reference. It can be field of non-ref struct. And some other limitations are listed also here. Another concept you have to master before you dive deeper into the span of T is ref returns. As documentation read, a reference return value allows a method to return a reference to a variable rather than a value back to a caller. I'll be honest with you, this definition really doesn't communicate much to me. So what I'm here for is to look at some code which will better explain what all this means. So as you can see, here's the class artist store, which basically just encapsulates an array of musicians. This is some musicians that I deeply enjoy, and also it exhibits two public methods. One of them returns the second artist of the collection in the traditional fashion via just the return. Other uses a novel ref return feature also to return the second artist. Also, there is a property all artists, which is just comma separated list of those items in the container. So now let's call those methods. Here you can see we create this artist store and we return an artist via a traditional method. Then we try to assign new value to this variable, to the variable artist. Here it is Henry Cow. Then we examine the original array. And basically now we see that inside the original array values are left unchanged because we changed the value of the artist, not the reference to it. Now let's have a look at the second example when we use return single artist by ref. Here we use the novel ref return. We get the artist, then we assign Frank Zappa to it, then we examine all artists again, and we can see that again it is left unchanged. So at this point you may be wondering what's the thing with it? What's the difference between novel ref return and just the traditional method? And here is what is third example after. Now again we call return single artist by ref, but now we use ref modifier near the caller and near the var keyword. Then we assign new value Valentin Silvestrov, this artist reference, and once we examine original array, we can see that this prominent Ukrainian composer is now on the list of musicians that I enjoy. So basically we got the reference, we changed it, and we changed the original value because we have worked with the reference. Now, with that said, we can now finally have a look at the sketch of implementation of span of T. So the first thing that you might notice that the span T is a ref structure. So if you remember the first slide where I mentioned that span T allows you to work with this contiguous regions member in allocation-free fashion, here's what it means. Here's why it is in allocation-free fashion, because span of T is a ref struct, which means that it can't be allocated on heap at all. It will be always allocated on stack. But in turn, it leads to some downsides because, as I've already mentioned, ref structs have a lot of downsides in order to be sure that they're allocated just on stack. So again, ref struct can be boxed, it can be part of class because class is not ref struct, and so on, so on, so on. It leads to some limited, it narrows down the scope of usage, but still, as I'll show you, it's quite useful feature. Another thing that I ask you to notice is that we have indexer. You can see this public indexer, public ref T, this int index, which basically says that you can access the elements of span by index. So this is contiguous regions of memory. It basically means that this is arrays, and the crucial operation for array is accessing by index. And the main point here is that this not just accessing the value by index, but it's accessing the reference due to this ref return feature. And basically, in order to access, you just use the reference to the pointer, which is the reference to the beginning of the array. And index is just the offset from the beginning of the array. So that's pretty it. That's pretty explains what span T is and how it's implemented. Now let's have a look at the span of T in action. The first our task and the first our demo for today will be to rework the existing code base, which converts Linux permissions to the actual representation. You know that .NET Core is here for a while, but to be honest, I'm a Windows guy, and I believe that a lot of my fellow listeners are also Windows guys. So here are the rules, what actually the code does, and the rules are the following. Basically, we will have the three blocks of three characters, and the octal representation is the three digits. Each of them is the sum of permissions inside the block. Then all those digits get concatenated. Let's have a look what are those digits. So you can see that for read permission it's 4, for write permission it's 2, for execute permission it's 1, and if we have no permission, it's 0. Now let's have a look at the example. Here you can see the string. It is broken down into 3 blocks. First is read, write, and execute, which stands for 4 plus 2 plus 1. This is 7. Another one is just read and execute, which is 4 plus 1. This is 5. And the last one is just write, which is basically 2. Then we concatenate those numbers and we get 752. Now, when you know the rules, let's jump to the code. And also not just jump to the code, but also run some benchmarks. So we've already set our build configuration to release, and we'll start the benchmarks because it's quite time-consuming process. So, wow, that went quite unexpectedly. Let me check if I can somehow fix this. It's really, really, really unexpected. Let me see if I can start it from the debug. Set it automatically close debug until function automatically close console. Oh, I see, I see. Let me reload the studio. I terribly, I terribly apologize for that small inconvenience. I hope we can combat this. In case we won't be able to combat this, I'll just dive through the code and you will have to believe me that the code with this span of t runs faster. But I'll hope that we won't have to do this. So yeah, benchmarks are running, and while they are running, we can finally examine the code. So basically, we have 2 files of interest here. One of them is symbolic utils 2, which is the traditional representation, and the other one is symbolic utils, which will be our worked representation. So what are the points of interest here? Here we accept string input, and then we call symbolic utils permission, which is class. We call static method parse, which accepts string input. So let's get back to the implementation. You can see that this is some sort of static factory which accepts strings. It validates that our string input conforms all the needed requirements that are needed for a string to be actually a Linux permission. If it's not, we fail. Otherwise, we call a private constructor, which again accepts string. And in the private constructor, we assign the parameter to the private value. Nothing fancy. Again, as you can see, this is string. So now, once we have constructed the valid business object, we just call the method getOctal representation of that object. Here is nothing fancy. I guess the main point of interest here is that we just call the substring of that original value. Now let's have a look at the reworked implementation. Now on the surface, it looks pretty similar. Now again, we call the static factory and we call the method getOctal representation once we construct the instance. But here's the fun part. Now parse accepts read-only span of char. So remember in the beginning I mentioned that span of t is not just a value type, it's a family of value types. And one of the members of this family is read-only span, which basically signals that you don't modify the input, you just use it for your own reasons. And the thinking here is that, as you all know, string is the array of characters, basically. So instead working with the array of characters, which is just the contiguous region in memory, you work with the read-only span of characters, which is the same representation of contiguous region of memory, but in allocation-free fashion. So now we accept this parameter. We call the private constructor, which again accepts read-only span of char. and we assign it to private value, which again is the read-only span of char. So once we calculate the octal representation, we again calculate the substring of this private field, but now with the slice method. So it's basically the same, but instead of substring, we just use the slice method. So I hope our benchmarks are done at this point. And you can see that read-only span is a bit faster, really. It allowed us to save like half of nanosecond, and it also allowed us to reduce the consumption in the generation zero of managed heap, which is quite obvious because we work now with the reference structure. And I won't lie to you that like this is like something groundbreaking that will make your code rocket fast. It's quite a modest performance improvement, to be honest. But on the other hand, look how simple it was. We just replaced the array of strings with the read-only span of strings, or excuse me, array of characters with the read-only span of characters. So my point here, and the point I wanted to show, that this is quite a low-hanging fruit that you can easily apply to your code, and it won't sacrifice any readability. It won't sacrifice your productivity, and with this you can still gain some performance improvement, even though it's quite modest performance improvement. Now, with that said, let's get to another example. In the previous example, we worked at the array of characters, but in the same fashion, we can work with the arrays of other types. So here's the code I've taken from ASP.NET pipelines. The task of this code is to convert a buffer into unsigned integer. And the trick here is the data in buffer may be in different memory segments because basically it drives over the network. So let's break down what this code does, and let's start from the very end. As you can see in the very end, we just use the text span variable. We try to parse it with the parser. If we fail, we just throw the exception. If we succeed, we're golden. So now let's have a look how this text span is populated. If the buffer has only single segment, which this flag suggests, then we just take this first segment and we assign it to the text span. Otherwise, things are more complicated. We manually allocate 128 bytes on stack with the stack lock operator. Then we craft the span byte based on that data manually allocated into the variable of destination. After that, we call the buffer copy to method, and we copy to the destination. The thing is that copy to iterates over each segment of the buffer and copies that into the span. After that, for the case when the buffer length is lower than 128, we just slice the destination from the beginning to the length of the buffer into the text span. So things are pretty similar, pretty simple, and the thing is that we manually allocated data on stack, and still this code looks quite readable and quite easy to digest. And also the last example I wanted to show is the F# support for this novel family of value types. Again, let's just jump back to the studio to the same code example, but a couple of commits ahead. So the thing is that the F# is the first class .NET citizen. And you know, the thing is that when you read the articles about the .NET stuff, you always see just C# examples, and you get the feeling that C# basically is the only option for .NET. However, that's not quite true, and we can check out how this feature is supported in F# too, and how it is really useful. So we have, benchmarks are running great. So we have two same implementations that we have already seen. And here's the third implementation. On the surface, it looks quite the same. Again, we struct symbolic permission tree, which again calls parse. And then after we get the valid business object, we again do parsing. However, things get pretty interesting here. Now, instead of calling the private method convert block to octal, we call this new helpers convert block to octal. Here in the C# code, you may think that this is just another C# class, which also leads to another point. In fact, this is not C# class, but it is the F# module that is declared in a separate assembly. So my point here is that if you want to try F#, you don't have always just to rewrite all your code base at F# at once. Furthermore, if you start some greenfield environment, you still don't have write all your code in F# because C# and F# code are basically interoperable. And I know some guys who basically enjoy some impure interaction with input-output in C# because it's more convenient. However, the domain, the core logic is purely functional F# logic, and people really benefiting from those functional approaches of F# without sacrificing the convenience of working with mutability in F#. So now let's have a look at the convert block to octal method. The syntax is quite tertiary, but it does pretty the same that it does its C# counterpart. And as well, it just accepts read-only span of char, and there are really no problems with just accepting read-only span of char, the same fashion as C# code does. So, which basically means that read-only span of char and read-only span of t in general and span of t in general is also supported in F#. Here are also a couple of points of interest. Here in F# you don't declare classes on structs in convenient to C# guys fashion. Instead, you just use the types and you denote whether it's a class or struct via this attribute. And also one fun point here is this val keyword, which allows you to declare the field later. Here it's to assign the field later. Here it is assign it later. It allowed me to save some bits of performance, which in turn will allow me to show the benchmark result that I'm really proud. So I hope the benchmarks are done. Yep, they are done. So here you can see that again, read-only span is a bit of faster than the original implementation, like 0.3 nanoseconds, and also it allocates less. Now let's have a look at the implementation with the Sharp helper. Here are some pros, here are some cons. The pros are that it's really faster. It's way faster than its C# counterpart. Even it's way faster than C# code that uses span of t. However, there's also a downside, which says that we allocate quite a lot. This is because we declare this helpers type, which in turn uses all those permissions. For the demonstration purposes, I've increased the numbers of blocks in order to get better difference in the performance results. However, it's still really fast, and if you are in doubt and you think that F# is something for some couple of computer scientists, that it is not practical language, here's the numbers that show the opposite. However, still another point is that once you try some performance improvements, still you have to benchmark those improvements in order to be really sure that they help in your case. So now, once I've showed you this example, let's jump to the conclusions. So as you have seen in my presentation and in my code examples, using span of t is the improvement, is the change that is really easy. It doesn't sacrifice the productivity. It doesn't sacrifice the code readability. However, it still allows you to get some performance improvement. And I think that is really great. And here listed some things that you might consider when you decide whether you should use span of t. So you should use it if a method accepts an array of data and doesn't change its size. Also, if it doesn't modify an input at all, then you might consider using read-only span of t, as in one of my examples. Another consideration is when your method accepts string to count some statistics, to perform some syntactical analysis. Long story short, where it doesn't modify string, then instead of string, you should accept read-only span char, read-only span of char. And the last point, if you return a short array of data, now the keyword again here is short, because as I mentioned in my slides, you can't allocate a lot on stacks, so you have to be careful with that. However, if your return array is short, you can return span of t instead of array with the help of the following construct, which says stack alloc of t and the size of your contiguous region of memory. And here's the limitation that t should be value type. Now, with that said, I'm really thankful for your attention, thankful for giving me the possibility to share some of my insights here. And I guess I'll stop sharing my screen at this point because I'm done with the presentation.
That was an amazing presentation, Bolan. You started with very basic what is Spanty, when it were some features. You also had some demos coming up. Quick question: that if I mean, for instance, I code in C sharp, right? And at what instance I should go ahead and start using F sharp? Because in the program, in the demo, in your presentation, you were talking about C sharp and F sharp very simultaneously, and you did say that there are some developers who like to use F sharp and C sharp at the same time. So, what is the case scenario I should be using F sharp?
I guess the experience tells me that one of the things where F sharp is really shines is domain modeling,
Okay.
because F sharp type system is quite more advanced than C sharp, and it allows you really to model your domain in a better way. And as I mentioned in my presentation, also, when you practice DDD, for example, your domain is free of all the external dependencies of the databases, so on, so on, and it allows you to make your domain functional. So my point is that one of the things that Redshift really shines is domain modeling. Also, there was some fun point which I mentioned in a serious way in one of my articles and mentioned as a joke with my coworkers. Once they asked me what is the spin with functional programming, why is it so popular? And I asked them, guys, do you enjoy LinQ? And they said, oh yeah, we really enjoy the LinQ. And I answered, oh, this is the functional programming for you guys.
Okay.
And this is another of my points that I wanted to show that when you work with the collections in F sharp, it allows you to work in really more declarative fashion and functional code to be more declarative, which is also quite beneficial for the readability of the code.
That definitely covers the when to use F sharp, and it clears the entire functionality of F sharp. We have few questions coming up from the MEPs and from the internal channel. I'm gonna read it. Okay, I'm gonna just change the format to this too big to. This is better. It says, is it possible for something like param spanty to ever be a thing in C sharp? I don't know what that is. This is a question for you.
Oh, to be honest, I've never really considered that. I'm not sure whether it's possible because of the limitations that Struct bring themselves, and also because params are some sort of like array of the arrays. So basically, if you compare to this spanty to the array, then params is like array of the arrays. But I guess we can have a try. Uh,
You gonna do it right now?
yeah, sure.
Oh well, that would be great.
Let me share my screen again, and let's have a try. Let's look at some of these implementations, and let's just try to say params read-only span char. And here it says that params must be a single dimensional array. Oh, you can see this is the thing that I've already mentioned, that basically it becomes an array of arrays. So that's why compiler doesn't let you. Uh,
Great, that's well answered. You see the demo too is coming up right at the moment in the live show. That's pretty cool. All right,
sure,
so
sure.
yeah,
But,
you can keep sharing your screen. I just dropped it from the live show. All right.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
There's one more question. I think that's the last one I'll take. I know we're already running out of time. Um, okay, this one. How can I create a memory? I don't know, the tea from a span tea.
To be honest, I've never worked with the memory of teas, so I'm not prepared to answer to this question right now.
Yeah, but if someone who's ever asked it from the internal challenge, I think if you just go ahead and simply Google it, right? And I think Microsoft has made a very good documentation out of it on how you can
Sure.
actually go ahead and do it, right? So if you go to even the span T documentation in the recommendation somewhere, you'll find someone doing it, and I think I did saw it the other day. I was preparing for this live show. I did see this question coming up in the forum. Then people were definitely asking it. So just go ahead and just check some of the Microsoft documentation. You will find it under the recommendation. I mean, if not the recommendation, you'll find it somewhere if you just go through that link. So that's one thing, and I don't know why people do ask this question at all. So it's okay. All right, Bodan, before we go ahead and end this question and this live show, right? One quick question. Apart from all this technical stuff we have been doing it for past 45 minutes, okay, is we do know you code, you are a programmer, you're a software engineer, and all that stuff. What do you do apart from all this when you get free time? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do other than this?
To be honest,
You
the
don't click
things
pictures,
that
we know that. You don't click pictures.
no, the thing is, as you can infer from my code examples, that I'm really passionate about the music,
Hmm.
and this is one of my passions. And also, I try to find to play musical instruments like guitar sometimes. But the thing is, why I found the question funny, because you answered what I do in the spare time from coding, and one of the things I tried with music is actually to program the music. There is a
Oh my
programming
goodness.
language, Super Collider, and once I tried to program the music with the Super Collider. So I guess the programming is such a passion that I try to apply it into different parts of my life.
This is the most unique answer we have ever received to this question in this live show. But my hobby is to go ahead and just program a music. Not many people would say that. So that was an amazing live show, Gordon. People love reading your articles. Thank you so much for all that you have been doing for the community. You not only you look at the other resources, you always go ahead and write for other people too. So we at C Sharp Corner really appreciate what you have been doing it. And I, Stephen Simon, on behalf of entire C Sharp Corner community, would like to thank you and for all the contributions you have done, and especially for coming to this live show, taking your time, and we would love to have you back and maybe meet you in person for the C Sharp Corner annual conferences. We could do it this year because of the pandemic, but maybe we may even travel to your place. I think if everything goes fine, C Sharp Corner is coming to Europe, so probably we'll just sneak into Ukraine or Russia too. You never know. So thank you so much, Bodhan. It was a really nice session, and have a great day ahead, and I will hope to see you soon.
Thank you for presenting this great opportunity to deliver my talk here. That's really a unique experience, and thank you for valuing my contributions. Have a good day too. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and thank you everyone who was joined us today. We'll see you on the next Wednesday and the next MVP show. And tomorrow we're gonna see you with Bob Ward for the SQL Server Edge to Cloud. Everyone, bye everyone. See you soon.
Bye.